to hear speak. She's almost like E.F. Hutton. Every place I go, everybody listens. And it seems that way. And I met this lady, I guess, about 8 years ago. Or I don't even know where I met her. She just seems to show up here and there. Maybe that's the way it happened. Her and her husband, they've helped me a lot around at the different weekends, the different retreats, the general assemblies and so forth. And when I see these people, they always come up and they love me, and that makes me feel good because I love them. And that's about all I can say about Patsy. She's been an inspiration to me, her and her husband both. And all I can do tonight is give you Patsy.
My name is Patsy Rodecker, and I'm an alcoholic. And it was at Lake Yale at an AA weekend, and Carl asked me if I would come over and share at this big book seminar. And he reminded me this morning that I told him the only reason I would not be here was that I was in a pine box. And when I came in at 11 o'clock last night, I told him I damn near made that pine box because I had a heart attack about a month ago, and we left the hospital at 4 o'clock and got here at 11 yesterday. So please pray. I know everything's going to be all right because I feel the juices flowing, and you are sustaining me. And Linda, you took me back so much when you came up here and got your chip. I remember the very first time that I said, my name is Patsy and I'm an alcoholic, and I went into hysterics. I cried and I sobbed from the very fibers of my being because, honey, I had established a fact. And I knew it in this gut level of me that no matter whether I stayed sober or whether I drank again, the words of my mouth had been manifested and I had established the fact. I am an alcoholic. I don't have a prepared talk for you, but I'm prepared. There was a time in my life that I drank almost half of my life pursuing my disease of alcoholism. I didn't know it at the time, but it's frightening today when I look back and see how determined I was to be an alcoholic. I didn't wake up one morning and just say, well, I think I'll be an alcoholic. But when I look at the diabolical determination and blasting through people's lives and compromising and prostituting every principle and standard I had ever known in pursuit of the bottle, I was determined to become an alcoholic, and I didn't even know it. So I spent half my life preparing myself to come to you or be one of you. And I tell you, when I came in, I didn't even know if you'd let me in with my track record. But then I didn't know anything about AA. And now, by the grace of God and the help of people just like you, everywhere I've been, once again, almost half my life, I have stayed sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that prepares me to stand before you tonight. I'm also prepared because I rested this afternoon, and I said, well, I'll do my part. I'm not going into a drunkalogue because it'll serve no purpose here. I am going to tell you about the first drink I took. It was at a little school function, and it was during Prohibition days, and the boys had a flask on their hip, and I wanted to be one of the crowd. I wanted to fit in, and I wanted to be accepted. and I found myself in the back seat of an automobile taking a straight slug from the jug for the first time in my life. I did not take very many drinks before these people took me home and dumped me. I couldn't understand that, honey, because I did this for these people. And I got upstairs and I got violently ill. And my stepmother comes into the bathroom and I tell her it's the chocolate ice cream at the party. I did not remember that very first drink until I was sober 14 years in AA. So I know what that book means when it says it will be revealed to you. I could only equate back to the time it became trouble. It started being trouble. And then one night, D-Land was holding a meeting for us, and everybody in the room talked about the very first drink. And I made a concerted effort to go back down memory lane. When was it? And now, 14 years sober in AA, and I think, oh my God, the very first drink I ever took, I got drunk, I got sick, and I lied about it. The die was cast, honey. I didn't stand a chance. Now, for a period of about 17 years from then on, I do not remember a day that there was not some intake of alcohol. Now, I'm not going to tell you I was in a drunken stupor for 17 years. At the age, well, I ain't going to tell you how old I was, but at a tender age, at a tender age, my life had run the gauntlet, and in desolation and desperation, there was a prayer from the very depths of my being. Please, God, let me make somebody happy before I die. And I meant that. I picked on this young man and I married him. And I don't have the answer today. The prayer was sincere. The prayer was honest. And you know, I turned right around and took that man through almost 20 years of unadulterated hell, and I have no explanation for it. I was in my pursuit of alcoholism. I had 4 children in 6 years, so I was doing a little something else on the side besides drinking. And you know you're not supposed to blame anybody for your drinking. But I'm going to tell you, that man and those 4 kids drove me to drink many, many times. Something that has always weighed heavy on my soul. I love these children with my heart and soul. I would have gladly laid down and died for them at any given moment of the day and night. But I would not stop drinking for them. I didn't know I could not stop drinking for them. I don't have to tell you what the paths I had to take, the lives I had to blast through, the things I had to do on my way to your door. We all tell our story when we walk through the door of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's why you and I know when that guy says to us, I know exactly how you feel. We know he means it. I almost killed myself justifying my existence. I had the Chamber of Commerce, the PTA, the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, the Garden Club, the Women's Club, and I thought these were attributes. I was a very active, civic-minded lady. Somebody in AA showed me that these were my defenses. We put our defenses up in case you dared to criticize my drinking, or when I had to go to the tavern before it opened and knock on the back door. But I'm the one that's got the Boy Scout troop. I'm the one that's got this. They were indeed defenses. After a particular low spot, a little bit more guilt, a little bit more remorse, and this is the first time I've said this from the podium. I used to tell you that waking up one morning after a drunk and feeling particularly low, I We still had a telephone then, and I called Alcoholics Anonymous. But I never prefaced it as what made me feel so low. But it was a son's birthday, and I had gone in town to buy some birthday presents for this boy. Instead, I pitched a 4 or 5 day drunk. I eventually came home. These are not easy things to say. I eventually came home, and I put the bag of toys on the couch. And then I was still living in this thing, if you don't say it out loud, it didn't happen. Don't tell me about last night. If you don't say it out loud, it didn't happen. But anyway, I called AA. You don't know the burden that has been of pulling that trick on that boy. It's been a heavy thing through the years, and I had to let go of it. But I know I did it. I made an attempt. I called Alcoholics Anonymous. They sent out a lady, and she, my hair is stringy, and I'm in a house coat, a dirty house coat, and I'm coming off a 4 or 5 day drunk, and here comes this gal with every hair in place, and she's got a beautiful summer dress on and got a nice looking car out there, and she looked so happy, and she was all the things I wanted to be, and I hated her insides. And she talked to me for a few minutes, and she knew she wasn't getting through, but she did leave some literature. And after she left, I drank a couple of beers. Then I read the literature. Now, that's not the way you do it. And on the back of one piece of literature was the 12 steps. My 2 beers taking me off to the races again, and reading those 12 steps, I said, those people are crazy. Ironically, I had almost a year of drinking again before I hit AA. Now I'm going to tell you about my last drink. By this time, the marriage was in shambles. The discipline at home was nothing. The finances were atrocious. And we owed every bank and loan company in Orange County. And I was going to town to pay some bills. And the man I was married to at that time, because you couldn't say husband and wife at this time in my life, but the man I was married to made a remark. I'd better not let you pay those bills because you have a couple of beer joints to pass. Well, honey, that computed long before we knew anything about computers. But it zoomed right in there. I did not react. I did not reply, but it computed. I went to town. I paid his bills. I walked past those beer joints. And I got up to Orange Avenue in Central, and I said, damn his soul, I'll show him. And I went off on a 5-day drunk. And something that used to amaze me, I started out in the best spot in town. And 4 or 5 days later, I'm in some dive behind the railroad tracks and wondering, how in the name of God did I get here? And I didn't know until you people told me. I followed the Bible wherever it led me, because I knew nothing at all about this physical compulsion. I knew about the mental obsession. Oh, my God, I've got to have a drink. A strange thing happened because, and bear in mind, there's a husband, there's a home, there's 4 children. They don't know whether I'm living or dead, in jail, in a hospital, and at that time I don't think they particularly cared. So these are not easy things to say. But a strange thing happened. I drank myself sober, and stark reality was coming at me like greased lightning, and I was scared to death. And eventually I got on the bus to go home. And here I stand in my story exactly where every one of you in this room have stood. Something happened, and I could not go home. I couldn't go home to do this over and over again, and I knew I would. I had reached my moment of truth. I had run the gauntlet of, I can stop anytime I want to. I'm not hurting anybody but myself. It's my money. It's my life. That stuff is good for 10 years of drinking, honey. But I had reached the point, my moment of truth. I knew I could not stop drinking. I got off of that bus and I was headed back to the bar. Where else does a drunk have to go? I was going to follow that bottle until I died. This is my emotional and mental makeup at this time. A red traffic light stopped me, and I looked up at that light and I said, please, God, don't ever let me take another drink as long as I live. Now, whether that is the first time I ever prayed or the first time God ever listened, but I went right in the drugstore and I called Alcoholics Anonymous. I was a half a block away from the clubroom. Be very careful what you pray for, because sometimes God answers you exactly the way you ask it. I got to the doorway, and a man was waiting at the foot of the steps. Excuse me, honey. He put his arm on my shoulder and he said, everything is all right now. And those words have never diminished in 34 years. Everything has been all right. My world has exploded in my face. There's been disappointment. There's been divorce. There's been death. There's been pain and agony of separation of children. But everything is all right. I walked up the steepest pair of steps I ever walked up in my life. And they used to have them on the second floor, the club rooms. These steep steps, and there was that little old landing in the middle. And I think it was there to give you a chance to change your mind. And I will tell you, in sometimes in my sobriety, if I'd had my druthers, I thought, oh, why in the name of God didn't I run? I got upstairs. They had the 12 steps on the wall, and they made a brief explanation of them. And if today, I can say in all honesty, if there is such a thing as a blanket acceptance of the 12 steps, I believe it was made at that time in my life, because these steps have become a way of life, and they have become my life. I came into AA, I'm sure, saying, why me? Just like many of you have. Why am I an alcoholic? Why can't I drink like the other person? Why does this have to happen to me? Well, do you know, honey, 34 years later, I'm saying, why me? But it has a different meaning. Why was I allowed the privilege of recovery when thousands of alcoholics are going to die tonight? And you and me have been allowed the privilege of recovery. It is awesome. I was in that club room, and of course, you young ones can't even imagine this. But in those days, women wore wide brim hats and silk stockings and white gloves when they went out on the main street. And in those days, the club room was a sanctuary. If you were shopping, you stopped in for a cup of coffee. If you were getting off from work, you stopped in for that little breather. There's a magic and a miracle of just seeing and touching another alcoholic. We sustain each other. Look how good I'm doing. I didn't think I was going to talk 5 minutes because I have no breath. But you sustain me. And you're allowing me to talk about the most important thing in my life. Well, here I am in that club room, coming off a 5-day drunk. And here is this lovely lady in her broad brim hat and her white gloves. And she told me how pretty I was. She told me she loved me. And then she said, we need you. And honey, she made me sick at my stomach. And I upchucked. Right in that clubroom floor, I upchucked. And I saw that woman take that hat off and take those white gloves off and clean that floor. And I said, oh my God, if I can just get out of here, I ain't never coming back. Humiliation. It's all right to say it, honey, just don't do it. I wish I had a nickel for every time I said I ain't going back. I did not know that was done for me, because somewhere down the road I was going to have to do the same thing from a sick alcoholic. And I don't know to this day if I'd have done it if you hadn't done it for me first. Everything that has been asked of me in Alcoholics Anonymous has already been done for me. They took me home that night, and one little girl says, I think we better buy her a half a pint because she's going to have a pretty rough night. And this man said, no. He said, she can shake and sweat and die, but she's had the last drink she's going to get. And I did all three of them things for 3 days. But there was something different. You people just like you, made me feel that you were shaking and sweating and dying with me. You know, every time I came off a drunk, it was, where have you been? What'd you do? Who were you with? How much money did you spend? What trouble did you get into? I'm coming off this drunk and somebody says, honey, have you had anything to eat? Have you got a place to stay? Somebody cared about me. And I was not the no-count drunk woman I believed myself to be. They took me home. And you see, if I had known what to do, and this is for you young ones working with new people, if that person coming in knew what to do, he wouldn't come to us. So we have to tell them. You got to tell them what to do. That's the sharing experience, strength, and hope. But somewhere else in that book, it says, I've got to tell you precisely how I recovered. So there is a responsibility that goes with it. And I was told to do 2 things that night. When they let me out of the car, they said, get down on your knees and thank God you found AA. In the morning, get down on your knees, and that was down on your knees from the beginning with me. And ask God to help you go one day without a drink. At the close of the day, back on your knees and thank Him. I had never really asked God to help me go through a day without a drink. I'd asked Him to help me get out of trouble. I'd asked Him many, many things, and He never did answer me. But I did exactly what I was told. I was told to come to a meeting the next night. And on that landing of that steep step, somebody said, Patsy, you went 24 hours without a drink. And I said, yes, sir. He said, that is as long as you'll have to go without a drink until the day you die. So immediately you reduced my entire life to 124 hours. It was about, I could just say my name is Patsy and I'll pass. It took me 3 months to say the alcoholic. Hell, I didn't know what an alcoholic was. None of us did. I thought I was a no-count drunk woman. Maybe they do know a little bit more today, but there wasn't as much available and much general awareness and acceptance in 34 years ago. And you had to tell me. It says in the book that I'm driven to you under the lash of alcoholism, under the lash of alcohol, and it's here that I learn and understand the nature of my disease. I didn't know I was sick, but the threefold disease was explained to me. I was not a no-count drunk woman. I was an alcoholic, and I didn't know what the hell to do about it. I didn't mean to become one. I didn't want my life to turn out the way it did, but something happened, and it happened to me. And you people helped to put that in its proper perspective. You explained to me the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. You explained to me the breakdown, that the spiritual breakdown was first, that in order to pursue the bottle, I had to step aside and cast aside all that was good, decent, and right in my life. Why? Because it interfered with my drinking. The spiritual breakdown that had nothing at all to do with God. The second was the mental, because there were a period of years that I believed I had to take that drink. I laugh today, but I pitched many drunks because I had to have a drink to scrub the kitchen floor. And I got drunk and the floor stayed dirty. But I believed I had to have a drink. And then when the horrible time came, the physical compulsion, and I drank when I didn't want to. I either drank alone or with people, and it didn't make no difference. But I used to prowl. And I remembered sitting on that bar stool, absolutely chained to it. Not wanting to drink, but having to drink. And that was my physical breakdown. Strangely enough, my recovery was just the opposite. The first step takes care of the physical because it removes the bottle. The second step takes care of the mental obsession, believing I had to drink. And the third step gives me a chance to restore the spiritual bankruptcy. But I didn't know how to go about this until somebody told me that when your automobile breaks down, you take it to an automobile mechanic. And when your TV breaks down, you take it to a TV technician. And here I am, the body, the mind, and the soul in the state of complete collapse. Where else can you take it except back to its maker? So we can, if you will indulge me, we can admit we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. And admission, acceptance, and surrender, if you will, because that first step, I surrender the bottle. The bottle is removed, and the healing processes of the physical aspect of my disease of alcoholism are taking place. Came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. In the beginning, you were that power. The book was that power. And then it was explained that this step had nothing at all to do with the insane things I did. That for me, with just a small measure of sobriety, of not drinking, if you will, for me to think I can drink again is sheer insanity. The mental obsession is being removed, and the healing processes of the mental aspect of my disease are taking place. Made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him. And here I have a chance to restore the spiritual bankruptcy. But if I had anything that I could pass on to you that was so freely given to me in regards to these steps, please read them exactly the way they are written. There are no double meanings and there are no superfluous words. About this time in the third step, everybody goes talking about the will of God. Everybody's looking for God. God ain't lost. But the only thing that is asked of me in that third step is to make a decision. That third step has nothing at all to do with God's will. It's making a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. Now, at this point, I don't know what my will and my life is. So I got to take step 4. That's where I'm going to find out what my will and what my life is. That's where I'm going to find out what is unmanageable. I just made a blanket admission my life had become unmanageable. Well, now I'm going to find out in the 4th step what's unmanageable. But look what's happening. And we don't know this when it's happening. I'm going from that 3rd step, a complete whole, well, not cured, but well personality. AA is the only place on earth that I know of that gets you well before it tells you what's wrong with you. All the doctors do all the diagnosing and all the scans and all this. Then they prescribe a program of recovery. And your first, second, and third step are going to take care of the problem. Now we're going to find out what it is in the fourth step. The suggestion in that written word. It says moral inventory, so don't crawl up on the cross. An inventory is the same procedure no matter what the commodity might be. Don't be afraid of your fourth step, because that fourth step is opening the door to an adventurous experience. You are going to start an in-depth study on the most interesting person on the face of this earth, yourself. There is a prayer after that third step, and it said, relieve me of the bondage of self, and most of us stop right there. But it reads, relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. But let's say we stop, relieve me of the bondage of self. We have been relieved of the physical compulsion to drink. We have been relieved of the mental obsession, believing we have to drink. And we have been relieved of the desolation and the emptiness that was ours without a power greater than ourselves manifested in our life. And now we're being asked to be relieved of the bondage of self, and that is exactly what 4, 5, 6, and 7 do. I was told to take one thing. Don't stay on step 4 so damn long you don't take step 5. I'm going to find out what is unmanageable. Remember, I came in here to stop drinking. I didn't come in here to get good. I didn't come in here to love nobody. I didn't come in here to get God. Those things are going to come if I don't drink. They have to come in order for me to stay stopped. God, that scared the hell. AA's done a lot of improvement in my life, but it hasn't made a complete lady of me yet. You know, when I come in and, if I could just stop drinking. And when it dawned on me that you people were talking about staying stopped, that scared the living daylights out of me. Never take another drink as long as I live. Oh, my God, what a black road that is ahead. But the guy had already taken care of that when he told me I only had to go one day. I would find one thing in my fourth step, I would write one thing down in my fourth step, and I would go right to my fifth step, my sixth, and my seventh, and chalk that one off. We're on our way with that one. I don't know about the life history and from the moment of birth, but I was told to start back with my last drunk. That was clear in my mind. That was clear, and that was something I was aware of. Now, it was not. I was told not to concern myself with the things I did on that drunk. I'm going to have to take care of them a little later, down in the 10th step, but in the 9th step, but not at this 4th step. There are no amends made, even though we're making amends. We start making amends from the day we come into AA. The day you put the plug in the jug, there are amends being made. And we are really, these things are happening and we're not aware of them. But I go right to that, get it in the 4th. I went back to that last drunk. Not what I did, not the things I experienced. What was wrong with Patsy when she said, damn his soul, I'll show him. Now take your inventory, they said. And there was the hate, and there was the bitterness, and there was the defiance, and there was the self-will. That is the moral inventory. Not what happened. It's going to be taken care of in a later date. Take it right into your fifth, a conditioning of willingness. And at this time in my life, I had to even change the scriptures. And it was, Lord, I'm willing, help my unwillingness. The unwillingness I didn't even know. And if I could not be willing to let go, I had to pray, and you had to help me, and you had to condition me by sharing with me how you had already done this thing. And then the humbly asking to have it removed. Well, now I get stymied because I find a whole lot of paradoxes in AA. It's anonymous, but my name is Patsy Rodecker. It's free, but here comes the basket. You get me well before you find out what's wrong with me. And let me tell you something. In that second step, God did restore me to sanity, but I don't stay restored. And I did turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him. But I changed my mind. And lo and behold, at the seventh step, I humbly asked God to remove all these shortcomings. And he did. But I don't let them stay removed. They become human frailties. Every one of you know what I mean, don't you? But it's going to be taken care of. I have, up to now, the answer to my prayer at the end of my third step has been fulfilled, because I have been relieved of the bondage of self. But because I was a sick practicing alcoholic does not excuse me from any harm that I did. There are some harms I will never, never be able to make up for. There are some that have passed from my being. There are some that only by not doing it ever again. And this is when I get to my 10th step, I hope I remember to touch on this. But the day of restitution comes. Now, if I've written that 4th step inventory, I've got a reference sheet, made a list of all persons we had harmed, and became willing to make amends to them. The clock runs mighty fast about this time in my life, and I realize that this is the time that God is taking care of the clock and operating the clock. My responsibility at this point in my recovery is to the physical effort and action of making a list, the spiritual and emotional condition of becoming willing, and leave the results in the hands of God, because God will provide the opportunity. And when it is supposed to be done, it will be done. And I don't have to go beating the low bushes. I don't have to spin my wheels, because the confrontation will come in God's time and in God's way. If I have written and I am willing. That has taken care of a lot of fear and apprehension of the past, so I've been relieved now of the burden of the past. You know, the beginning of and it's right about here that the promises come in the book. And the first thing it says, you will know a new freedom. You're free of the bottle, you're free of the mental obsession, you're free of the self-will and self-centeredness and selfishness. You are free of people, places, and things. That 9th step, honey, brings you and me in our now. Everybody's saying, gotta get in my now. You know, that's what does it. And I am free of people, places, and things. Now, how do we keep it that way? In the 10th step. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. The inventory is different now. It's not a moral inventory, it's a personal inventory. I've been sober for a while. I've been going to meetings. I have been practicing some principles, whether I'm aware of it or not. And if I'm going to meetings, I'm praying twice a day, whether I want to or not. Things are changing. And I am responsible I'm responsible for my sobriety. I'm responsible for the words of my mouth. I'm responsible for my actions and my reactions of this day. And at the close of the day, continued to take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. I got to share one thing with you. The marriage that I had when I came into AA ended in divorce, but I had to be very grateful that this man had stayed with me for 20 years while I was sick and suffering and dying of the disease of alcoholism. I did have a roof over my head, and I did have something to eat. This man had provided that in my illness, and when he left, it had to be with gratitude that he had stayed with me. And he left, and it had to be a divorce because it was another marriage to be consummated about 5 years later, see. I didn't know this. But I had never been a good wife or a good housekeeper or manager. I didn't know anything about finances. I'm married to this new man. A letter comes one day, and it's a window envelope, and I'm going to go a few minutes over my hour, but y'all took some of my time away from me. And it was a pink piece of paper, and I didn't say, I knew it was a doctor bill done. I knew it. I just hadn't paid the bill, but I was still procrastinating in those days, see? And so when we went to bed that night, before we went to bed, my husband had asked me what was the mail. And here, 4 or 5 years sober, the mind thinks a window envelope, a pink slip, it was something from the blood bank. Well, before I went to bed that night, I was vomiting. I was physically ill. And I crawled into bed beside that man. I said, Dick, how soon is promptly? And he said, honey, for you, it was 2:30 this afternoon. He knew. Well, to my knowledge, I never lied to that man again. And it wasn't because I was wanting to be honest. I just didn't want to vomit anymore. And I guess maybe that has been part of my recovery. When I don't do what I'm supposed to do, I hurt. And when I get tired of hurting, I do the right thing. I think most of our growth and progress in AA is put off until we just can't stand it any longer, and then we'll do it the way it's supposed to. The book is so profoundly simple. You want this, you do this, and this happens. Don't question, don't analyze. Just do it. Why? Because the book says so. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And oh, this is a zinger. You and me think we can understand and comprehend the powerful, phenomenal will of God. It is such a many-faceted thing. There was, of course, the original intentional will of God, that everything be wonderful. But then he created man. And then there became the conditional will of God. Then we experienced the permissive will of God. But you and I will one day realize the ultimate will of God. And this is what I take into my 11th step. Praying only for knowledge of his will for me and the power to carry it out. Surely for me, an alcoholic, surely it is the will of God that I be sober. I can be content with that. And then I came across a little scripture. Be joyful in all things. In everything be grateful. Pray without ceasing. For this is the will of God concerning you. Don't that take a monkey off your back? Be filled with joy, be ever grateful, and pray without ceasing, and leave the results in the hands of God. I don't have to work. God ain't particularly interested in what job you're doing or what man you're running around with at this particular... I mean, the joy and the fulfillment that I am God's most prized possession. when I feel absolutely worthless. So then it tells me in the book, it's to discipline me in unselfishness and love. Where have I been unselfish? Where have I been lacking in love? It's the code of AA is love and tolerance. Where have I been remiss in these things? These are the things that for me are the will of God, that I be unselfish, that I be, and that surrender after a fashion. The bottle, the price tag on the bottle for the rummy is everything he's got. And don't you think for 1 minute that your sobriety ain't going to be the same price tag. And I have walked across my bedroom many a night saying, God, there ain't nothing more to surrender. It's all been done. You pull a little curtain. Oh, no, there's a little something over here we got to work on. So it's a constant staying pliable in the hands of God. Having had a spiritual awakening is a result of these steps. We tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And there has something's different, an attitude, a standard, a sense of value, a principle, a way of life. There had to be changes or I would be drinking. I think the book says to the alcoholic who still suffers. Isn't it wonderful it doesn't say the alcoholic who's still drinking? Because that suffering alcoholic could be the guy sitting right next to you. We are well, but we ain't cured. And our struggle on this road to recovery, there are a lot of stones in the way. But I will tell you something. A little fellow from California told me, he said, because the book tells us that decision we make in that third step, the success of our program is going to depend on how well and how earnestly we make this decision. So this little guy, little black guy from California, he said his sponsor told him that when he got to that third step and he made that decision with a gut-level honesty to pack his suitcase because he was going on a trip. And that's what we look at as our road to sobriety. It is an adventure and it is a trip. And practice these principles in all our affairs. In each step, you will come up with a principle by which you can live. You will come up with a principle that will sustain you. Oh, there's many things written throughout the AA literature and everything that tell us about principles, but you will get your own. Just take a look at this. The first step is a principle of honesty by which we can live, and we don't even realize it. The second step is a humility brought on by our own humiliations. And the third step is a hope that can become a faith that can sustain us. Because you and I come in and we hope. Somewhere along the line we believe. Somewhere we know. And I am sure that there are those out here tonight that know that they know that they know. And this is practicing these principles in all our affairs. Now, would you give me about 15 more minutes? You know, these big book seminars are mainly for you young people. Everybody that wrote a story or took part in our first edition of our big book has passed from our midst. The enclave of the people coming in in the 40s, most of them have passed from our midst. Now it's getting close to home. I came in the 50s, and there ain't too many of us around. So you see, it is into your capable hands at these big book seminars that we are passing on our program of recovery. And I did a little bit of research, And I want to share a little something with you. Maybe you don't know it. You may think that AA was always like this, but it wasn't. And I'd like to tell you what I come up with. And this is at the risk of repetition because I wasn't here yesterday and I didn't hear all the... So if I say something that Woody and the girls have said, just bear with me. But I just want to mention, AA began in Akron, Ohio in 1935 as a result of the meeting of a New York stockbroker and a well-known surgeon, both who were severe cases of alcoholism, and they were destined to become the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. The basic principles of AA were borrowed mainly from the fields of medicine and religion, although some ideas upon which our success finally depended was the result of noting the behavior and the needs of the alcoholic himself. After 3 years of trial and error, a large amount of failure to get alcoholics to recover, the three successful groups emerged. I'm reading this, honey, because I don't want to get my facts. You know, I don't want to give you my opinion. First in Akron, second in New York, and third in Cleveland. Even then, it was difficult to find 50 sure recoveries. Nevertheless, this infant fellowship determined to set down its experiences in a book, which finally reached the public in April of 1939, approximately 100 recovered alcoholics. The book was called Alcoholics Anonymous, and from it the fellowship got its name. And on the cover of every book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it is identified as the basic textbook of AA. This is exactly what you've been talking about this weekend. Even when I came along, some 24 hours ago, there was general service office, there was answering service, there were club rooms, there were meetings, general awareness, publicity in the papers, and it never occurred to me that it wasn't always like this. We're not the first who have come this way. And the longer I'm in AA and look back, when things were not like they are today, I am aware of the awesomeness that faced the alcoholic before AA. Now, I'd like to share with you some things that were instrumental in bringing AA into being. And as I speak of these things, it certainly will bear in mind in God's time and in God's way. Carl Sandburg wrote that when a society, organization, or fellowship perishes, there is one common factor. They forgot where they came from. In 1956, the medical profession recognized alcoholism as a disease. But, honey, that ain't when it started. I guess alcoholism has been a problem ever since man first crushed the grapes. But we do know that right after the Revolutionary War, Benjamin Rush, a scientist and a signer of the Declaration of Independence, wrote in a medical paper that alcoholism was a progressive disease and the treatment was abstinence. So the fact has been known for over 200 years. People either forgot or they didn't know how to act upon it. True, he said, don't drink, but he couldn't tell you how. It's kind of like the doctor says, don't worry, but he doesn't tell you how. So alcoholism was still a big problem. The next big movement to come along was the temperance movement in 1820. A man named Lyman Beecher started the temperance movement, and it swept through the country like wildfire. Not because he was particularly noble or gifted, but because there was such a tremendous need for an answer to the disease of alcoholism. They knew that abstinence worked. They knew if you didn't drink, you got better. They tried all kinds of ways to induce people to try abstaining. They cajoled, they threatened, they used the power of religion, they used the fear of God, and they even tried fellowship. And they had some measure of success. At one time, over half the people in the country were involved in some way in the temperance movement. About 25% of the people had signed pledges not to drink. These are astounding figures. It really was a popular movement. In 1840, a group of alcoholics were drinking in Chase Tavern in Baltimore, and they decided they ought to send somebody down to sit in on one of these temperance meetings. So they selected a fella, and he went to the meeting, and he came back, and he told them what he'd heard. And they decided amongst them, alcoholics drinking in the bar, they decided amongst them they would try. They'd try to stop drinking. They were going to meet every night at the tavern and try to keep each other from drinking. These men started the Washingtonian group. They called themselves after George Washington. They made a deal that they would tell each other about themselves and try to help each other to keep from drinking. The movement also swept through the country like wildfire. Within 1 year, there were 1,000 people in the Washingtonian movement. In 2 years, there were 5,000. In a short time, there were chapters all over the country. Meetings, rallies, conventions, 20,000, 30,000 people at these affairs. It's interesting to note that it took AA 3 years to get 40 sober members. President Abraham Lincoln talked at the first anniversary of the Washingtonian group. I have not seen the speech. It's on record with the Abraham Lincoln papers in the Library of Congress, and it's 30 pages long, they tell me. But in it, he did remark, he spoke of the power of the Washingtonians, saying that they were not preachers telling others what to do. They were men themselves who had suffered much, and they shared this with others, helping each other by identification. And that we do in AA. There was also a woman's part of the Washingtonians. They called themselves the Martha Washingtons. And it was for the wives and the family. So you see, Al-Anon was not the first that realized the need of the wife and the family. And this bears out what Bill wrote one time, that nobody invented AA. It just grew. And these are some of the little sprouts from which we grew. I just thought maybe you'd like to hear it. It was so interesting to me. And because of the broad breadth of suffering and the long suffering of the alcoholic, AA was to come into being in God's time. Just like the temperance movement and the Washingtonians, because there was such a tremendous need. There's no other reason for us to be in existence except for the tremendous need, the incredible need for some kind of an answer for acute alcoholism. Within 5 years, the Washingtonians had reached their crest. And at that time, according to whatever paper you read, they had 100 to 600,000 recovered sots, they called them, within their movement. It was about this time they started to diminish. And within 10 years, nobody could even remember them. It makes you kind of humble to realize these people had transformed lives. These people had had spiritual experiences. The President of the United States had spoken of their power and recognized their goodness. And yet within a decade, they were gone. They did not hold fast. They did not stay together. They forgot where they came from. About this time, the country began to get very involved with psychology. This was at the turn of the century. And William James came along, and he was a physician who taught at Harvard University. He began to use the power of psychology and the power of religion. He wrote a book which had a tremendous impact on Bill Wilson, Varieties of Religious Experiences. His timing was right, for the country was ready to accept the acceptance of psychology. The Washingtonians had the power of religion, but did not have the clear understanding of the mechanics of the human psyche. Mary Baker Eddy was very popular in Boston about this time with the Christian Science movement. The movement used the power of a scientific understanding of Christianity as a method of treating all kinds of illnesses. Then came along a group called the Emmanuels. They were from an offshoot of the Episcopal Church, and a man in that group named Wooster wrote a book, Science and Medicine, and he specifically used the power of religion and the power of psychology in the treatment of nervous disorders, among which was alcoholism. And lo and behold, the Emmanuels had tremendous success. One man, an alcoholic named Courtney Bella, got sober, and he began treating other alcoholics. And a little later on, the Episcopal Church granted him a stipend, and he had 10, 20, 30 recovering alcoholics. And I guess we might say that Courtney Bella was the first two-hatter to come around because he was being paid for treating alcoholics. One of the people he treated was Richard Peabody, a very learned and intelligent man who wrote a book, The Common Sense of Drinking. We're getting real close to AA now, because this book came out in about 1920. And it dealt with the treatment from the psychological approach, the alcoholic's personality disorders, the need for abstinence, rest, diet, and meditation. Richard Peabody brought the psychological and sociological approach into the treatment for alcoholism. About the time a man from Pennsylvania came on the scene, and he was Frank Buckman. He was a Lutheran minister, and he had a particular ministry for people that were troubled. And he was to be the founder of the Oxford Group in the United States. He was a sensitive and charismatic man with a tremendous skill to bring about a lot of understanding in a very forceful way, and to convince a lot of people that they could transform their lives today. This conviction is another element in the preparation for Alcoholics Anonymous to come. And one person who was mesmerized by Frank Buckman was Sam Schumacher, an Episcopal minister from Calvary Church in New York City. He lived on Gramercy Park, just a few doors from Richard Peabody, who had been sobered up by the Emmanuels. Meanwhile, a lot of other things were happening. A man in Rhode Island named Roland Hazard, an alcoholic who had been treated over and over again by a Dr. Carl Jung in Europe. Roland was very affluent, a former state senator from a very successful business family with all the money and means to take all the cures and treatments available. And Roland kept getting drunk. And he was getting worse and worse, and Dr. Young told him that he could not help him. And he went on to tell him he'd heard of the Oxford movement, where people had a spiritual conversion experience in their lives with such force that it was unnecessary for them to drink again. Maybe they could help him. Roland went off to find the Oxford group. It was very popular in England at that time. He came back to New York. He was a member of Calvary Church. Sam Schumacher was the minister, and Sam Schumacher was the man that had been tremendously influenced by Frank Buckman. And just a few doors away lived Richard Peabody. Now we're getting real close to Alcoholics Anonymous coming about. At this particular time, God had placed all these people together within a couple of blocks, and each one of them in their own way had been laying a foundation, and the elements were there for the miracle to happen. And what happened? Roland got sober, and he helped Ebby. Ebby got sober, and he helped Bill. Bill got sober, and he helped Dr. Bob. And today, the likes of you and me, we got sober, and we're helping each other. And because we have held fast, we have stayed together, we have not forgotten where we came from. But there was yet another man, Dr. Silkworth. He certainly did not start out to be a doctor of drunks. He was a victim of the times. It was during the Depression, and he went to work at Towns Hospital for $40 a month, and they put him on the alcoholic ward, and he worked so hard and so long. And he was Bill Wilson's doctor. And because Dr. Silkworth worked so long and hard with alcoholics, his conclusion was that alcoholism was a physical allergy and a mental obsession. And this was the part of the puzzle that was missing. This was what nobody else had. And Dr. Silkworth gave that to Bill. Dr. Young had already given Roland the part of the answer, a vital spiritual experience, and the Oxford group had provided the vehicle, and now all the pieces fit. Everything in divine order for AA to begin in Akron in 1935. Reflect with me, if you will. The temperance movement, the Washingtonians, the Emmanuels, the Oxfords, all powerful, dynamic, good movements. And yet today, I'll bet you half the people in this room never heard of any of them. Nobody remembers them because they forgot where they came from. But from their loss, we get meaning, and we understand the preciousness of what we have in Alcoholics Anonymous today. That is the purpose of a big book seminar, to pass it on exactly the way it was written. AA is 52 years old, and have you stopped to realize that not one thing in the AA program has been changed? Stop for a minute and think of medicine, education, religion. Think of all of the changes and the innovations in the past 50 years. Not one thing has been changed in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That is truly phenomenal. But even more phenomenal than that is that a bunch of drunks have allowed it to stay that way. So if any of you young ones get the idea, change something, forget it. Because it takes 2/3 vote of the membership of Alcoholics Anonymous to change one thing. And I told you, this whole thing was for you young people. It is into your capable hands that we're passing our program. And it means a lot to me that you receive it in the manner to which it's given. AA was there when my father needed it. It was there when I needed it. It was there when my son needed it. But it will be up to you to make it possible for my grandchild if they need it. It is written in the book that in spite of the great increase in span of our fellowship, at its core it remains simple and perfect. Every day somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing their experience, strength, and hope with each other. And honey, that ain't changed in 52 years. In closing, I would like to make just a personal note. I almost made that pine box, and I still have a fervent hope in the depths of my being. I hope when I die that God will ask me one question. I hope He'll ask me, what did you do with my gift of sobriety? And I hope I'll be able to answer, I gave it away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patsy. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sure we're getting tired and restless, and we didn't want Patsy to go over too long. I'm sure everybody really enjoyed that, Patsy. Is there any more announcements, Marco, from the back or anything? By the way, Patsy, your son, Robert's with us tonight. He's sitting on the end here. And his wife, I can't remember her name. And what I'd like to do, real briefly, if you don't mind, we've met Robert and Ann, and we're going to start right next to them and go around and just say our name and where we're from. The lady in the black.